Vren stood in the center of the mercenary guild hall, his forearms crossed as he stared at the holographic display floating before him. The numbers glowed in bright blue light. He read them 3 times to make sure his eyes were not playing tricks on him. 15 million credits. Enough money to buy a small moon or retire on a paradise world for the rest of his life. The contract was simple, or at least it seemed simple on paper. Eliminate a human military team operating in the Outer Rim, 6 soldiers. Just 6. This is madness, Vren muttered in his deep voice. Around him, 20 of the guild's best warriors had gathered to review the contract. They had never seen an offer this large for such a small target. It's just humans, said Kelver, a young Torgash mercenary with green-scaled skin. How dangerous can they be? They only joined the Galactic Coalition 6 months ago. They're new to space combat. Vren's eyes narrowed. He was old, almost 60 cycles of age, and he had survived this long by never underestimating an enemy. Pull up the footage, he ordered. All of it. I want to see these humans in action before we make any decision. The guild's information officer, a thin Quellan named Cess, worked the controls. The holographic display changed, showing a dark corridor inside what looked like an old mining station. The timestamp showed this footage was from 3 weeks ago. This is from the Helvar Station raid, Cess explained. Human Special Forces Team Designation Iron Shadows, led by Commander Taesung. The station was taken over by pirates holding 200 civilian hostages. The footage began to play. Vren watched as 6 figures dressed in dark combat armor moved through the corridor. Their movements were smooth and careful. They used hand signals to communicate, barely making any sound. Professional, Vren thought. But nothing special yet. Then the action started. The humans rounded a corner, and immediately came under fire from 12 pirates armed with plasma rifles. Most soldiers would retreat, find cover, reassess. The humans did something different. They pushed forward. Vren leaned closer to the display. One human, marked as Taesung in the combat data, threw something small. A flashbang grenade. The explosion was bright even through the recording. Before the pirates could recover, the humans were on them. Their weapons fired in short, controlled bursts. Each shot found its target. In less than 20 seconds, all 12 pirates were down. Impressive, admitted Kelver, but still just basic combat tactics. Keep watching, Cess said quietly. The footage continued. The human team moved deeper into the station. They encountered more resistance. 20 pirates this time dug into defensive positions. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. Any reasonable team would call for backup or retreat. The humans split up. 2 of them, including Taesung, drew the pirates' fire while running across open ground. They moved fast, diving and rolling behind whatever cover they could find. The other 4 humans used this distraction to flank the enemy from both sides. The tactic was risky, almost suicidal. The 2 humans in the open were taking heavy fire. One of them got hit. A plasma bolt struck her shoulder, burning through her armor. The combat data identified her as Corporal Biora. She went down hard. There, Kelver said. They lost one. The mission will fail now. But Biora did not stay down. She got back up. Her left arm hung useless at her side, clearly broken. The thermal imaging showed her body temperature spiking, indicating severe pain. Any normal soldier from any normal species would be out of the fight. Waiting for medical evacuation, Biora switched her rifle to her right hand and kept shooting. Vren's blood ran cold. He watched as this wounded human continued to fight like nothing had happened. She used her broken arm to steady her weapon against a wall, fired 3 shots, then moved to new cover. Her accuracy barely decreased. By the void, whispered another mercenary, a veteran named Threx. She's still fighting. The flanking maneuver worked. The humans caught the pirates in a crossfire and eliminated them. But the footage was not over. The team moved on, and Vren noticed something that made his skin crawl. According to the mission timer, they had been fighting for 16 hours straight. 16 hours without rest, without food, without stopping. The next part of the footage showed the hostage rescue. The humans cleared room after room, their movements never slowing down. When they finally reached the hostages, they worked quickly to free them. Taesung coordinated the evacuation while Biora, her arm still broken, provided security at the door. The mission timer when they finished showed 72 hours. 3 full days of continuous combat operations. No sleep, no breaks. Just constant movement and fighting. Sess pulled up medical data. After the mission, the human team was examined by coalition doctors. All 6 were suffering from extreme exhaustion, dehydration, and various injuries. Corporal Biora had a compound fracture and severe burns. The doctors reported that any other species would have been incapacitated by pain alone. Vren felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear, not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the deep, cold fear of recognizing something truly dangerous. "Show me more footage," he demanded. "I want to see other human operations." For the next 3 hours, the mercenaries watched. They saw human soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most species. They saw humans in frozen environments and burning buildings and toxic atmospheres. They saw humans take injuries that should have ended fights, but the humans kept going. They saw humans adapt and overcome impossible situations through sheer determination. One video showed a human soldier whose helmet was cracked, exposing him to thin atmosphere. Instead of retreating, he wrapped his face in cloth torn from his uniform and continued his mission for another 2 hours. Another video showed humans trapped and surrounded, outnumbered 5-1. Instead of surrendering, they fought for 18 hours straight until reinforcements arrived. "They won. They don't fight like soldiers," Threx said slowly. "They fight like they've already accepted death and decided to take as many enemies with them as possible." Vren stood silent for a long moment. Around him, his mercenaries looked shaken. These were not young recruits. These were hardened warriors who had fought across dozens of worlds. And they were afraid. "I have seen many species in combat," Vren finally said. "I have fought the Kresh with their battle rage. I have faced the Torgash with their tactical genius. I have watched the Dreth fight with honor. But these humans..." He paused, searching for words. "These humans have something different. They have trained themselves to endure suffering. They have made pain into a weapon." Kelver, the young Torgash who had been so confident before, spoke up. His voice was no longer dismissive. "So what do we do about the contract?" Vren looked at the number again. 15 million credits. A fortune beyond imagination. Then he looked at the footage of Taesung and his team. 6 humans who fought like they were already dead. "We refuse," Vren said. The room erupted in shocked voices. In 40 years, the guild had never refused a contract. Never. Vren held up one of his 4 hands for silence. "Listen to me. Yes, we could probably kill these humans. We have numbers, we have weapons, we have experience. But look at what we would pay to do it. Half of us would die. Maybe more. These humans will not run. They will not surrender. They will fight until they are dead, and they will take as many of us with them as they can." He turned to face his mercenaries. "Is any amount of money worth that cost? We are warriors, yes. But we are not fools. The guild survives because we choose our battles wisely. This is not a wise battle. The vote was taken. It was unanimous. For the first time in the guild's history, they refused a contract. As the mercenaries filed out, Sess approached Vren. "Commander, this will spread. Other guilds will hear about this." Vren nodded slowly. "Good, let them hear. Let everyone know. The humans have been in space for only 6 months. But they have already taught us something important." He looked back at the frozen image of Biora, fighting with a broken arm. "They have taught us that there are some enemies you simply do not fight. Not because you cannot win, but because victory would cost too much." The holographic display powered down, leaving the guild hall in darkness. But Vren knew that what he had seen today would stay with him forever. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would be the same. The news traveled fast through the mercenary networks. Within days, every guild in the galaxy knew that Vren's legendary company had refused a contract. Within weeks, they knew why. The footage of human special forces operations spread like wildfire. Mercenaries who had fought across 100 worlds gathered in bars and guild halls to watch the videos. They analyzed the tactics. They studied the movements. And slowly, they all reached the same conclusion: humans were different. Lieutenant J1 did not know any of this as he crept through the dense jungle on Carvex 4. His mission was simple reconnaissance, gathering intelligence on Kresh Dominion military movements near Coalition space. In and out, quiet and clean. No combat expected. He should have known better. Nothing ever went according to plan. The ambush happened at dawn. J1 was checking his scanning equipment when he heard the rustle of leaves that did not match the wind. He turned, reaching for his weapon, but the stun blast hit him before he could draw. His muscles locked up and he fell hard into the mud. When he woke, everything hurt. His head pounded. His mouth tasted like copper. He tried to move and found his arms chained above his head, stretching his body until his toes barely touched the floor. The room was dark except for a single light pointed directly at his face. "Good, you are awake." The voice came from the shadows. It spoke Coalition Standard with a harsh, clicking accent. "Kresh," J1 said nothing. He took deep breaths through his nose, calming his racing heart. The first rule of captivity was to assess the situation. He tested the chains, strong. The ceiling mount was solid metal. The floor was smooth stone. No obvious weaknesses. The Kresh interrogator stepped into the light. It was tall, over 7 feet, with gray skin and multiple eyes that reflected the light like a predator. It held a small device in one clawed hand. "I am Interrogator Vex," the Kresh said. "I have broken soldiers from 214 species. You are my first human. I am curious to see how long you will last." J1 remained silent. His training had prepared him for this. He knew the techniques. Pain, sleep deprivation, psychological pressure. He knew what was coming. Nothing to say? Vex tilted his head. "That is fine." They all start silent. "Let us begin." The first day was the worst. Vex used the device to send electrical shocks through J1's body. The pain was incredible, like fire in his veins. Between shocks, Vex asked questions. Unit designation. Mission parameters. Coalition defense positions. J1 gave his name, rank, and serial number. Nothing else. The second day, Vex changed tactics. Cold water, bright lights, loud noises. No sleep. J1's body shook from exhaustion, but his mind stayed focused. He used a technique they taught in survival school, creating a mental room where he could retreat when the pain became too much. In that room, he thought about his team, his family, the mission. "You are stubborn," Vex said on the third day. "More than most. But you will break. They all break eventually." By the fourth day, J1 could barely stand. His wrists were raw from the chains. His body was covered in burns and bruises. Vex had brought in other interrogators, specialists in various torture methods. They took turns, never giving him a moment to rest, but something strange was happening. The Kresh interrogators were getting frustrated. They had expected him to break by now. Most species lasted 2 or 3 days at most. But J1 was still resisting. On the 5th day, Vex tried something different. Psychological warfare. "Did you know we sent word to the Coalition about your capture?" Vex said. "They responded. They said you are not worth a rescue mission. You have been abandoned, human. No one is coming for you." J1 almost smiled. The Kresh did not understand. Human special forces trained for this exact scenario. They were taught to assume they would never be rescued. They were taught to survive on their own, to escape on their own. The idea that no one was coming was not meant to break his spirit. It was already assumed. That night, chained in the darkness, J1 meditated. He slowed his breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. He lowered his heart rate, entering a state between sleep and wakefulness. His body remained still, but his mind stayed sharp. This was another technique from training, a way to rest without truly sleeping. On the sixth day, Vex made a mistake. He got angry. "Why will you not break?" Vex shouted, his multiple eyes blazing. "What is wrong with you humans? Are you too stupid to understand you have lost?" J1 looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw it, fear. Vex was afraid. This interrogator who had broken hundreds of soldiers was scared of one exhausted, injured human. "I'm not broken," J1 said quietly. His first words in days, "because I already accepted I might die on this mission. You cannot threaten me with something I have already made peace with." Vex stepped back as if struck. In that moment, J1 saw his opportunity that evening. When the guards brought his meager food ration, J1 was ready. He had spent hours working his shoulders, stretching his joints beyond their normal range. It was agonizing, but his training had taught him how. With careful, practiced movements, he dislocated both shoulders. The pain was blinding. He bit down on his tongue to keep from screaming. Blood filled his mouth. But his arms, now loose in their sockets, slipped through the chains. He fell to the floor in a heap. For a moment, he could not move. Then training took over. He forced his shoulders back into place, gritting his teeth against the pain. He could barely lift his arms, but they worked. The door opened. A guard entered, expecting to find J1 still chained. Instead, J1 was waiting. He struck fast, hitting the guard's throat, then taking his weapon. The guard fell, gasping. J1 moved into the corridor. Alarms started blaring. He was wounded, exhausted, barely able to walk. But he was free, and he was armed. What happened next became the stuff of legend. J1 fought his way through the creche facility like a ghost. He used every trick he knew. He set traps using equipment he found. He ambushed guards in dark corridors. He moved when they expected him to hide and hid when they expected him to move. The creche could not understand it. How was this injured human evading 40 armed guards? He should have been recaptured in minutes. But somehow, he stayed ahead of them. In another part of the galaxy, Captain Hyjin and her ranger unit were facing their own impossible situation. Their insertion behind enemy lines had gone wrong. Their extraction point was compromised. They were stranded on a hostile world with enemy patrols everywhere. "We have rations for 3 days, said Specialist Deho, checking their supplies. Hyjin looked at the map display. The nearest friendly position was 200 kilometers away through enemy territory. "Then we will make them last 11 days, she said simply. Her team did not question the order. They had trained for this. They knew how to survive on minimal resources, how to move unseen, how to endure. For 11 days, they moved through enemy territory like shadows. They ate 1 meal a day, splitting their rations into tiny portions. When they found a contaminated water source, they used purification tablets and their own bodies as filters. Knowing the sickness would pass but dehydration would kill them faster, they set traps for enemy patrols, using materials scavenged from the environment. Wire from abandoned equipment became tripwires. Chemicals from their medical kits became basic explosives. Rocks and branches became barriers and false trails. The enemy knew they were out there. They sent hundreds of soldiers to hunt them. But Hyjin's team stayed ahead, leaving only destroyed equipment and confused enemies in their wake. When news of these 2 missions reached the mercenary guilds, the reaction was immediate. More contracts were refused. The pattern was becoming clear. Human Special Forces soldiers did not operate by normal rules. They endured conditions that should kill them. They fought when they should surrender. They escaped from situations that should be impossible. In a bar on Station Crick 7, a group of Vraxian mercenaries watched footage of J1's escape. The security cameras showed him fighting through the facility, moving despite obvious injuries. "Look at his eyes," one Vraxian said. "He is terrified. You can see it, but he fights anyway." "That is what makes them dangerous," another replied. "Fear does not stop them. Pain does not stop them. They just keep going." Back in the creche facility, J1 finally made it to the hangar. He stole a small scout ship and launched before the creche could stop him. As he jumped to hyperspace, bleeding and barely conscious, he allowed himself a small smile. He was going home. The creche commander, who had overseen his captivity, wrote a report that would circulate through intelligence networks for months. In it, he wrote something that would haunt him. The human prisoner displayed fear. He was afraid, but he had already accepted death. He was simply waiting to choose when and how he would use it. This is not normal psychology. This is not normal training. There is something fundamentally different about how humans approach combat. They do not fight to win. They fight because they refuse to accept defeat. These may seem like the same thing, but they are not. I recommend we avoid capturing human special forces in the future. If we cannot kill them quickly, we should not engage them at all. The cost is too high. The report ended up in the hands of mercenary guilds across the galaxy. Combined with the footage and the stories, it painted a clear picture. Dr. Talvax had studied military psychology for 30 years. She had written papers on Kresh battle rage, Torgash tactical thinking, and Dreth honor codes. She thought she understood warfare. Then the coalition military asked her to explain why mercenaries were refusing contracts on human soldiers. And she realized she understood nothing at all. She sat in her office at the Galactic Military Analysis Institute, surrounded by data screens showing footage from dozens of human military operations. The numbers did not make sense. Humans were physically weaker than most species. Their technology was not superior. Their tactical doctrine was not revolutionary. Yet somehow they had become the most feared soldiers in the galaxy in less than a year. There had to be an explanation. She was determined to find it. The first step was direct observation. The coalition had arranged for her to interview human soldiers at their training facility on Earth. Talvax had never been to the human homeworld before. As her shuttle descended through the atmosphere, she saw vast oceans and sprawling continents. Earth was beautiful, but nothing about it seemed to explain why its soldiers were so formidable. Sergeant Dongmin met her at the landing pad. He was average height for a human, with dark hair cut very short and scars visible on his arms. His eyes were sharp and alert. When he saluted, the movement was precise and automatic. "Dr. Talvax," he said. "Welcome to Earth. I have been assigned to answer your questions about our military training." They walked through the facility. It was Spartan, with minimal decoration. Everything was functional and efficient. Talvax saw human soldiers running in formation, their boots hitting the ground in perfect rhythm. They were singing something, a rhythmic chant that helped them keep pace. "This is basic training," Dongmin explained. "Every human soldier goes through this. It lasts several months. We teach them to work as a unit, to follow orders, to maintain their equipment." "This seems standard," Talvax said. "Most species have similar programs." "Yes," Dongmin agreed. "But this is just the beginning. For special forces, the real training comes later." He led her to another area of the facility. Here, Talvax saw something that disturbed her. Human soldiers were submerged in tanks of cold water. She could see them shivering, their skin turning pale. Medical monitors showed their body temperatures dropping. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "Cold water immersion training," Dongmin said calmly. "They stay in water just above freezing until they cannot feel their limbs. Then they must complete tasks while hypothermic. It teaches them to function despite physical distress." Talvax watched in horror as a human soldier was pulled from the water, barely able to stand and immediately ordered to field strip a weapon. His hands shook violently. It took him several tries, but he completed the task. "This seems like torture," Talvax said. Dongmin looked at her with those sharp eyes. "It is not torture. Torture is done against someone's will to break them. This is training." These soldiers volunteered. They want to be here, but why would anyone volunteer for this? "Because," Dongmin said simply, "in combat the environment does not care about your comfort. The enemy does not care about your pain. We train in suffering so that when we face real suffering it is familiar. It is just another day." They moved to an outdoor area where soldiers were running. Talvax checked the distance markers. 20 kilometers. The humans were carrying heavy packs and weapons. Their faces showed strain, but they did not slow down. How long do they run? Talvax asked. Until we tell them to stop, Dongmin replied. Sometimes hours. Sometimes until they physically cannot continue. Then we teach them to find more. More? More strength. More endurance. More will. There is a saying in human special forces, when your body wants to quit, you are only 40% done. We teach our soldiers that the limit they think they have reached is not real. They can always go further. Talvax was beginning to understand, and it frightened her. You are conditioning them to ignore their own survival instincts. No, Dongmin corrected gently. We are teaching them to control those instincts. Fear is useful. Pain is information. But they cannot be allowed to control your decisions. A soldier who panics dies. A soldier who gives up because something hurts loses. We train them to feel fear and act anyway. To feel pain and continue anyway. They entered a classroom where human soldiers were attending a lecture. The instructor was showing footage of a mission that had gone wrong. Soldiers had died. The instructor walked through every decision, every mistake, every missed opportunity. We study our failures, Dongmin explained. We learn from them. Every mistake is analyzed, every loss is examined. We tell stories about the soldiers who came before us, both the victories and the defeats. It creates continuity, a sense of purpose that extends beyond individual lives. Talvax was taking notes frantically. This was unprecedented. Most species tried to forget their failures. Humans studied them obsessively. Tell me about selection, she said. How do you choose who becomes special forces? Dongmin's expression became serious. We do not choose. They choose themselves. Anyone can volunteer for special forces selection. But the attrition rate is 70 to 90% depending on the unit. 70 to 90% fail? Yes, the selection process is designed to find people who will never quit. We put them through weeks of extreme physical and mental stress. We deprive them of sleep, food, comfort. We push them until most people break. The ones who do not break, who keep going no matter what, those are the ones we want. That seems incredibly wasteful, Talvax observed. You are rejecting most candidates. We are not looking for the most candidates, Dongmin said. We are looking for the right candidates. One soldier who will never quit is worth 100 who might. He led her to a memorial wall. It was covered with names. Thousands of them. These are the Special Forces soldiers who have died in service, Dongmin said quietly. We remember everyone. We tell their stories. It reminds us why we train so hard. It reminds us that this is not a game. Talvax spent 3 days at the facility. She watched training exercises that pushed humans to their absolute limits. She saw soldiers complete obstacle courses while exhausted. She watched them navigate in complete darkness using only sound and touch. She observed close combat training where they fought until they could barely stand, but what disturbed her most was an exercise called drown-proofing. She watched as soldiers were thrown into a pool with their hands and feet tied. They had to survive for an extended period using only breath control and body positioning. This is insane, she said to Dongmin as they watched. They could actually drown. Yes, he agreed. That is the point. We need to know they can control their panic in life-threatening situations. If they panic, they die. So we put them in situations where panic is natural and teach them to stay calm anyway. Every trainee survived. But Talvax could see the fear in their eyes as they were pulled from the water. They had been genuinely terrified. And yet they had done it. On her last day, Talvax asked Dongmin the question that had been bothering her since she arrived. Why? She asked. Why do you do this to yourselves? Why create such brutal training? Why volunteer for suffering? Dongmin thought for a long moment. Do you know about human evolution? He asked. I know the basics. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We did not have claws or sharp teeth. We were not the fastest or the strongest, but we could run. We could track prey for days, following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. We won by simply refusing to give up. He gestured to the training grounds around them. That is still in us. That ability to endure, to persist, to outlast. Modern warfare requires different skills, but the fundamental principle is the same. We win not because we are stronger or smarter than our enemies. We win because we will not stop. Talvax returned to her office with terabytes of data and a disturbing conclusion. She spent weeks writing her report, revising it multiple times. The final version was over 200 pages long, but the executive summary was simple. Human special forces represent a unique approach to warfare, she wrote. They have weaponized persistence. Through cultural conditioning and extreme training, they have created soldiers who view suffering as normal and defeat as temporary. Most species train their soldiers to be effective in combat. Humans train their soldiers to be impossible to stop. They do not train for victory. They train to never quit, which makes victory inevitable if they survive long enough. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. When facing a human special forces operator, the enemy knows they are fighting someone who has already accepted death, who has trained specifically to endure any hardship, and who will continue fighting long past the point where any reasonable being would surrender. This creates a reputation effect. Even if a specific engagement could be won against human forces, the cost would be disproportionate. Human soldiers will fight to the last breath, taking as many enemies with them as possible. This makes them undesirable targets for mercenaries and pragmatic military forces. She included statistics in her report. Human special forces had a 95% mission success rate. When they failed, they inflicted casualty ratios of 5-to-1 or higher before being killed. They had never surrendered. Not once. Even when wounded, even when surrounded. The Vraxian Death Sworn had never refused a contract. For 300 years, they had been the second most feared mercenary force in the galaxy. Their warriors were genetically enhanced with denser muscles, faster reflexes, and redundant organs. They had the best weapons money could buy. They trained from birth for combat. When they heard that other mercenary guilds were refusing contracts on human targets, they laughed. Commander Wrath stood before his assembled warriors in their ship's briefing room. He was massive even by Vraxian standards, nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and armored skin that could deflect small arms fire. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "we have been offered a contract that others fear to take. A human special forces team operating on Tarsi 7, 6 soldiers. The pay is substantial. Should we, the Death Sworn, fear what others fear? No." His warriors shouted in unison. "Should we refuse credits because our enemies are supposedly fearsome?" "No," Wrath smiled, showing his predator's teeth. "Then we hunt." The target was Major Kyung-ho and his team. Intelligence reports showed they were conducting routine patrols near the border. Settlements on Tarsi 7, the planet was mostly wilderness with scattered mining outposts. Perfect ambush terrain, Wrath planned carefully. He would take 12 of his best warriors against 6 humans. 2-to-1 odds, overwhelming firepower, superior physical capabilities. They would hit the humans during a routine patrol, eliminate them quickly, and collect their payment. They landed on Tarsi 7 3 days before the scheduled patrol. Wrath had his warriors scout the route, identify the perfect ambush point, and prepare their positions. Everything was planned down to the last detail. The ambush point was a narrow canyon with high walls on both sides. The human patrol would have to pass through it. Wrath positioned his warriors on the high ground with clear fields of fire. When the humans entered the kill zone, they would be caught in a crossfire with no cover. "Remember," Wrath told his team, "humans are physically weak but reportedly stubborn. Do not give them time to react. Hit them hard and fast." Overwhelming force. On the day of the ambush, Wrath watched through his scope as the human patrol entered the canyon. 6 figures in standard coalition combat armor, moving in a tactical formation. They were alert but not suspicious. Perfect, Wrath gave the signal. 12 Raxian warriors opened fire simultaneously. The initial volley was devastating. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds converged on the human formation. 2 humans went down immediately. The others scattered, returning fire as they dove for whatever cover they could find. Keep the pressure on, Roth ordered. Do not let them regroup. His warriors poured fire into the canyon. The humans were pinned down behind rocks and debris. This should be over in minutes, Roth thought. They cannot fight back effectively, but the humans did not break. Despite losing a third of their force in the first seconds, despite being pinned down and outnumbered, they did not panic. Roth saw one human marked as Kyung-ho in his tactical display, coordinating his team with hand signals while also providing covering fire. Then something unexpected happened. One of the wounded humans, a female designated as Staff Sergeant Yoonji, started crawling. She had been hit twice, once in the leg and once in the torso. She should be out of the fight, dying or at least immobilized, but she was moving. She dragged herself behind a large rock, leaving a trail of blood, then began firing at Wrath's positions. Her shots were accurate despite her wounds. Target the wounded one, Roth ordered. Finish her. 3 warriors redirected fire at Yoonji's position, but she had chosen her cover well. The rock protected her from most angles. And she kept shooting. Minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. The humans were still fighting. Roth frowned. This was taking too long. He signaled for his warriors to begin a flanking maneuver. 4 warriors began moving through the rocks to catch the humans from a different angle. That was when everything went wrong. The human sniper, Specialist Sung-ho, had been quiet during the initial firefight. Roth had assumed he was one of the casualties. But suddenly, one of Roth's flanking warriors dropped. A precise shot through his helmet's vision slit. Roth scanned the canyon walls. Where was that shot from? His sensors showed that Sung-ho had a severed artery in his arm. How was he still fighting? How was he even conscious? Another of Wrath's warriors fell. Sung-ho was using a natural rock formation as cover, his rifle braced against stone. Even wounded and bleeding, his aim was perfect. Suppress that sniper, Roth commanded. All units concentrate fire. But the humans were adapting. Kyung-ho was moving his team, using the Vraxian focus on Sung-ho to reposition. 2 humans, including the wounded Yoonji, began working their way up the canyon wall. It was a nearly impossible climb, especially for injured soldiers. But they were doing it. 1 hour passed. 2 hours. The firefight continued. Roth had expected this to be over in minutes. Instead, it was becoming a prolonged engagement. He had lost 3 warriors. The humans had lost 2, but the rest were still fighting despite being wounded. Commander, one of his warriors called. The female is still moving. She has climbed halfway up the western wall. Roth could not believe it. Yoonji had 2 bullet wounds and had been crawling and climbing for over an hour. She should be dead. But there she was, still moving, still fighting. He sent 2 warriors to intercept her. They moved quickly, using their superior strength to climb the canyon wall. They would reach her position in minutes, but Yoonji saw them coming. Instead of retreating or trying to hide, she did something that chilled Wrath to his core. She pulled a grenade from her belt, activated it, and threw it not at the warriors but at the rock face behind them. The explosion triggered a small rockslide. It was not enough to kill the warriors, but it blocked their path and forced them to find another route. Yoonji used the time to reach a new position. 3 hours. 4 hours. The sun was setting. Roth was growing concerned. His warriors had superior numbers and firepower, but they could not land a decisive blow. Every time they thought they had the humans pinned, the humans found a way to adapt. Kyung-ho was proving to be a formidable opponent. Despite being wounded himself, he was coordinating his team's movements, calling out enemy positions and keeping his soldiers focused. He was also treating Sung-ho's wounds between firefights, using basic medical supplies to keep the sniper conscious. How much ammunition do they have left? Roth wondered aloud. They had been in continuous combat for hours. They should be running low. Movement on the eastern ridge, a warrior reported. The humans are flanking us. Impossible. The humans were supposed to be pinned down, but somehow Yunji had reached the high ground. She was now in a position to fire down on Wrath's forces. Wrath made a decision. He sent half his remaining warriors to deal with Yunji. It was a risk, splitting his force, but he could not allow the humans to gain the high ground. The warriors climbed quickly, their enhanced strength making the ascent easy. They reached Yunji's position and engaged her directly. At close range, the fight should have been over instantly. A wounded human versus 4 Vraxian warriors, but Yunji did not try to shoot them. She had saved her last grenade. As the warriors closed in, she activated it and dropped it at their feet, then threw herself off the ridge. The explosion killed 3 warriors instantly. The 4th was badly wounded. And Yunji, despite falling 30 feet, was still alive? Roth could see her on thermal imaging, broken but breathing. "By the void," one of his warriors whispered. "What are these creatures?" 6 hours. 7 hours. The darkness was complete now. Roth's warriors had night vision equipment, but the humans were using the darkness to their advantage, moving between positions, making it hard to track them. Wrath had started with 12 warriors. He was now down to 6. The humans had started with 6 and were down to 4, but all of them were wounded, some severely. By any logical measure, Roth should still win this fight, but he was beginning to understand what the other mercenary guilds had been trying to tell him. This was not about logic. This was not about numbers or firepower. The humans simply would not stop. Sung Ho was still providing sniper fire despite having lost massive amounts of blood. Yunji was still moving despite broken bones and bullet wounds. Kyung Ho was still coordinating despite exhaustion. They were beyond their physical limits, operating on sheer determination. 8 hours into the battle, Roth made the hardest decision of his military career. He called for extraction. "We are withdrawing," he announced to his remaining warriors. "Commander?" One warrior said, shocked. "We can still win this. At what cost?" Roth asked. "We have lost 9 warriors to 4 wounded humans. If we continue, we will lose everyone. The contract is not worth it." They withdrew under cover of darkness, moving quickly to their extraction point. As they left, Wrath looked back at the canyon. He could still see thermal signatures of the humans. They were regrouping, treating each other's wounds, preparing to continue if necessary on the flight back to their ship. Wrath's warriors were silent. They were the death sworn. They did not retreat. They did not fail. But they had just done both. "Commander," one warrior finally said, "I have fought many species. I have never seen anything like that. They should have died. By every measure, they should have given up. But they did not." 6 months after the Vraxian defeat, the coalition military held an emergency meeting. Representatives from 20 species gathered in the Grand Chamber on Central Station. The topic was simple but troubling: what to do about the human special forces problem. It was not that humans were causing problems. In fact, they were exemplary members of the coalition. They followed orders, completed missions, and worked well with other species. The problem was that their reputation had grown so fearsome that it was creating diplomatic incidents. Ambassador Kellern of the Torgash stood at the podium. "We have a situation," she began. "In the past 6 months, over 200 mercenary contracts targeting human military personnel have been refused. This is unprecedented. More concerning, some military forces are now refusing to patrol sectors where human special forces operate." She brought up a holographic display showing data. "The psychological impact cannot be understated. The mere presence of human special forces in a region is now considered a deterrent equal to deploying an entire battle group." There were murmurs around the chamber. Some species saw this as positive. Others were concerned about the implications. "We need to understand this phenomenon better," Kellern continued. "I propose we establish a formal classification system for human special forces units and develop new protocols for their deployment." The debate lasted for hours. Finally, they agreed to invite a human representative to explain their perspective. Colonel Yujun was selected for this role. Yujun arrived at Central Station 3 days later. He was tall for a human, with gray in his short hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. He wore his formal uniform with multiple decorations. His face was weathered and calm. "Colonel Yujun," Ambassador Kellen greeted him. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Yujun replied. His voice was quiet but carried authority. "I understand there are concerns about human special forces operations." They led him to a private conference room where military leaders from various species waited. The atmosphere was tense. These were experienced warriors, but many looked at Yujun with barely concealed wariness. "Colonel," began General Threx, a massive Quellan with 4 arms, "we have reviewed the data. Human special forces have a reputation that exceeds their actual combat capabilities. We want to understand why." Yujun sat down calmly. "What would you like to know?" "Why do your soldiers not surrender?" asked Commander Vexel of the Kresh. "We have observed multiple situations where surrender would be tactically sound, even advantageous. Yet humans continue fighting." Yujun considered the question. "Surrender is not forbidden in our military code. If a soldier determines that surrender would save lives and continued resistance is futile, they are authorized to surrender. But Special Forces soldiers rarely reach that conclusion." "Why not?" Vexel pressed. "Because we train them to see options where others see none. To a human Special Forces operator, the situation is not hopeless until they are dead. Even then, their actions might have prepared the ground for those who come after." General Threx leaned forward. "This training you speak of? We have read Dr. Talvex's report. It describes what many species would classify as systematic abuse. How do you justify this?" Yuchion's expression did not change. "We do not force anyone to undergo this training. Every Special Forces soldier volunteers. They can quit at any time during selection. Most do. Those who complete the training do so because they choose to, every single day. But why would anyone choose such suffering?" asked a Dreth commander. "Because they believe in something greater than themselves," Yujun said simply. "The mission. Their team. Their nation." Every human Special Forces operator knows they might be asked to go into impossible situations. They train hard because they know their teammates depend on them. They know civilians depend on them. Quitting in training means they might quit when it matters and people would die. He paused, then continued. "You think our training is cruel. Perhaps it is. But we are asking these soldiers to do incredibly difficult things. To go behind enemy lines. To rescue hostages. To gather intelligence in hostile territory. Would it be more cruel to send them unprepared?" The room was silent for a moment. Then Kellen spoke. "Colonel, we are preparing to classify human Special Forces as apex predator units under coalition military doctrine. This classification has previously been reserved for strategic weapons. Do you have any objections?" Yujun shook his head. "No, if that classification helps other forces understand the capabilities and limitations of human operators, then it serves a purpose." "Tell us about limitations," Threx said. "The data suggests your soldiers are nearly unstoppable." "That cannot be accurate." "Of course not," Yujun agreed. "Human Special Forces soldiers are not invincible. They can be killed like anyone else. They get tired, they feel pain, they make mistakes. The difference is that they have trained to continue functioning despite these factors." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "You want to know what makes human Special Forces dangerous? It is not that we never lose. We lose often. It is that we make you pay such a high price for victory that it feels like defeat." "Explain," Kellen said. Yujun turned back to face them. "When you fight human Special Forces, you might win. You might kill us all, but we will fight back every step of the way. We will use every advantage, every piece of terrain, every second of time. We will hurt you badly before you win. And if even one of us survives and escapes, we will remember everything about how you fight." We will share that information, and the next time we will be better prepared. He sat back down. This is what frightens mercenaries. Not that they cannot beat us, but that beating us costs too much. They lose more money in casualties than they would earn from the contract. It is simply bad business. The meeting continued for several hours. Eugen answered questions patiently, explaining human military culture, training methods, and operational philosophy. He did not hide anything or try to make humans seem more impressive than they were. He simply stated facts. As the meeting was ending, Threx asked one final question. Colonel, do you ever fear that your soldiers' refusal to quit might lead to unnecessary deaths? That sometimes retreat is the wiser option? Eugen was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. That fear keeps me awake at night. Every commander struggles with it. We tell our soldiers to never quit, but we also teach them to think, to adapt, to recognize when continuing means throwing lives away for nothing. He looked around the room, meeting each leader's eyes. But here is what you must understand. In the moments when we need them most, when the situation is truly dire and there is no good option, we need soldiers who will not break. We need people who will hold the line, complete the mission, protect the innocent, no matter the cost. That is what special forces are for. The impossible missions. The ones where someone has to go, even knowing they might not come back. And people volunteer for this? Vexel asked, still incredulous. They do, Eugen confirmed. Not because they do not value their lives, but because they value something more: purpose, brotherhood, the knowledge that they stood when others could not. When you understand that, you understand human special forces. The meeting ended with the formal adoption of the new classification system. Human Special Forces units would be designated as Apex Predator units, equal to strategic weapons in planning considerations. The news spread through military networks within hours. Later that evening, Eugen found himself in the station's observation lounge. He was looking out at the stars when Vren, the mercenary guild master, approached him. Colonel, Vren said, may I speak with you? Of course. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Vren said, I am the one who refused the first contract on your soldiers. Commander Taesung's team. Eugen nodded. I heard. I am glad you did. They are good people. I watched footage of your soldiers in combat, Vren said. I have fought for 40 years across dozens of worlds. I have seen many warriors, but I have never seen anything like your special forces. We are just people doing a difficult job, Eugen said. No, Vren shook his head. You are more than that. You are soldiers who have weaponized the one thing most species try, to avoid suffering. You have taken the worst parts of existence. Pain, fear, exhaustion, and you have trained yourselves to walk through them like they are nothing. Eugen smiled slightly. They are not nothing. They hurt just as much for us as they would for anyone. We just keep walking anyway. Vren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have heard that human special forces have a motto. The only easy day was yesterday. What does this mean? It means that every day will be hard, Eugen explained. Every day will challenge us. But we already survived yesterday's challenges, so we know we can survive today's. It is a reminder that difficulty is normal, expected. We do not hope for easy days. We prepare for hard ones. This philosophy, Vren said slowly, is why mercenaries will not fight you. Not because you are unbeatable, but because you have made suffering into your home territory. You are comfortable there, and we are not. Perhaps, Eugen agreed. But do not mistake comfort for pleasure. My soldiers do not enjoy suffering. They simply refuse to let it stop them. They stood together watching the stars. Two warriors from different worlds, different species,